Third, to give a boost to the weak states most willing to do what is necessary to join the system. And fourth, to make it clear to the outlaw states that they cannot prosper at the expense of the rest. They must either reform or suffer in isolation. Clearly, the international system is not a precise term. It refers to a vast network of rules that govern ties among countries, rules that range from the simplest bilateral treaty to the most complex global agreement. Because it serves our interests, it is U.S. policy to help the system remain vibrant and become more inclusive. That is why we're working with our allies to build a NATO strengthened by new members and trained for new missions. It is why we have worked with friends in Asia to freeze North Korea's nuclear program. It is why we stand with the peacemakers against the bomb throwers in the Middle East, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, and other troubled regions. And it is why we're determined to build on the 1994 Summit of the Americas to further integrate our own hemisphere as a bastion of democracy, a hub of economic growth, and a leader in promoting security through law. Progress within our region is not a zero-sum game. As nations, corporations, and people, we all have a stake in whether we can establish and enforce a system of standards that will cause our hemispheric community to grow more peaceful, prosperous, stable, and free. That is the philosophical underpinning of NAFTA and our goal of a free trade agreement for the Americas by the year 2005.
But especially want to express my appreciation being here today with David Rockefeller. I've known David for many years, and as the founding member of the council, he's rendered yeoman duty to the nation. The family has a long history of strengthening the bonds of friendship throughout the Western Hemisphere, and of course my predecessor, Nelson Rockefeller, served as Assistant Secretary of State for Latin America in this department back in the 1940s. In organizing the council in 1965, David and his colleagues were among the first to grasp the enormous consequences and possibilities for the economic and political progress throughout the Americas. In the 37 years since then, many of those possibilities have been realized. In 1965, Latin America had very few free market economies and only a handful of democracies. Effort to pursue a free trade agreement with the nations of Central America. Success here will further strengthen our economic ties with those countries and reinforce the economic and political progress they've made over the last decade. Free trade with Central America will also move us toward an even broader aim, a free trade area of the Americas, up and running by January of 2005. The President is strongly committed to this goal, and all of our trade efforts are pointed in this direction. The Council of the Americas has been crucial in bringing us to this moment, and I know that we can count on your wisdom and your commitment in completing the great work that lies ahead. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vice President, on behalf of all of us here, I'd like to express a word of thanks to you. In a time of trepidation and confusion, you have responded with confidence and clarity. The administration's leadership has inspired us all. Your own calm has been our comfort. Your conviction, our compass, and your resolve, our strength. When we are able to go about our business here in the Americas and around the world with confidence and security, it's because we know the strength of this government stands behind us. For that and for all your other contributions, we thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the Vice Presidents of the United States for being here. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
This is a side note. Just talk about the wealthiest people in the United States and particularly in the world. Forbes magazine every year produces a list of what they call the wealthiest people or families in the world. And in recent years, Bill Gates has been touted to be the most wealthy, and with a net worth of somewhere 40 or 50 billion dollars, depending on the value of his stock on the stock exchange. But he's a pauper when compared to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And let's look at the wealthiest families in the world. Each year, Forbes magazine ranks the wealthiest people in the world, or so they say. But none of their list include the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. In 1998, the Rockefeller family was worth $11.48 trillion, and the Rothschild family is worth somewhere between $100 and $400 trillion, possibly more. And they get this tremendous wealth because they own the central banks of all the nations in the world, except the rogue nations. And when they need money, they simply just print it. It's not backed by gold or silver or anything of value. The U.S. State Department has called several nations rogue nations, and their definition of a rogue nation is any nation that harbors or finances terrorists. Now, if we look at the current nations on this list, one is Cuba, and there's absolutely no evidence that Cuba harbors or finances terrorists, so they could not meet that definition. Another rogue nation, as defined by the State Department, is North Korea. They do sell weapons to anyone in the world that'll buy them, but there's no evidence that North Korea harbors or finances terrorists. A couple of other rogue nations, as defined by the State Department, are Afghanistan. By the way, the elite established a central bank in Afghanistan in the year 2002, one of their objectives. Another rogue nation is Iraq. We've invaded Iraq, and they've already established a central bank in Iraq, and they did it in the year 2003, toward the mid-year. The remaining rogue nations, as defined by the State Department, are Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya, and Pakistan. And President Bush has made several conversations about possibly the need to look into Syria and Iran next, and if they do, then it won't be long till Sudan, Libya, and Pakistan will follow. Now, rather than harboring or financing terrorists, the only common thread between all these rogue nations is that none of these nations allowed the international bankers to own their central bank. That's the real reason that they're called rogue nations. Now, who's behind all of this? Some call them the Illuminati, others call them the shadow government. When George Herbert Walker Bush was president, he called them the New World Order. Others call them the International Banking Cabal. I simply call them the Global Union. Now, what will happen in the United States between now and the year 2006? Let's get into that. In order to complete the American Union, the elite must create either a economic or civil crisis, and it's my contention that they won't do this in the year 2004 because it's a major presidential election year, and they want to re-elect George Bush, so they will wait until the year 2005 to crash the economy of the United States. So somewhere in early part of 2005 or no later than 2006, we will have a very heavy recession and possibly a major depression. In order to create a civil uprising, they will cause the people that joined the militias back before Y2K to come out of the woodwork, because no dictator has ever taken over their country or their region without first declaring private ownership of firearms illegal. So there will be continuing steps to tighten up on the control of firearms within the United States, and then sometime in the year 2005 they will outlaw them completely. And this is a deliberate plan to